Every successful venture creates trust. Every time that you prove reliable builds trust.
This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Welcome to the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast. My name is Sam, and I'm joined by Dr. Richard Blackaby.
Good to be with you, Sam, once again.
Always a pleasure, Richard.
I can't say it enough, just what a privilege.
Well, I can't hear it enough. That's for sure. I always appreciate that. It's the only time you ever say it's good to see you, and that's why we keep recording. Only when the mic is on. No. Well, today we want to look at, we recently did an episode on the 4 platforms of a leader, but keeping with the numerical theme here, we're going to dive into the 3 bank accounts of a leader, and this comes from a recent blog that you wrote on your website, richardblackaby.com. And I'll let you, since I didn't write it, and I look forward to reading it eventually.
Yeah.
But I may not have to now. Which that's the great thing about this podcast. I don't have to read your writing. I just have to do your podcast,
promote it, and
then,
talk about it.
Yeah. Say, that's great,
and appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course, I always do. So, which is why I've kept doing this for so long. It's
well, you're right. This is there's a blog I recently wrote on the Richard Blackaby Leadership blog, I think. Is that what it's called?
It's just richardblackaby.com.
Okay. Yeah, but
that's why I'm here, folks.
Yeah, keep me straight. But I wrote a blog recently just called The 3 Bank Accounts of Leaders, and of course you can have more than 3 accounts, but I wanted us just to consider the fact that we do operate out of various accounts in the way we lead. And I was reminded of that recently because I manage a couple of different checking accounts. It's not because I've got lots of money, but just the way things have kind of worked out for me. I've got just my basic checking account that I keep my money when I'm paying bills with all the time. And then a while ago, I bank online, and I was always having trouble keeping everything balanced. And so what I began doing is I had a second account, and that's what I'd pay all my online banking bills with. And so if I had a $200 credit card bill, I would set that up to pay when it was supposed to be paid, and then I'd transfer $200 into that account. So I knew that those bills would have money in there to cover it, and I wouldn't be spending more money than I actually had. So every time I entered another bill to pay, I made sure there was enough money in that account, so they all got paid. And so that was at least 2 accounts. And then I also, for several years, managed my parents' checking account as well, and so I used that when I was handling their finances and issues and so on. And then also I have an LLC, just a small kind of side business that I manage with my writing and some things like that. And so there's also an account for that. And it sounds like I must be moving a lot of money around. I'm not really, but I'm just bad at math. And the only way to kind of keep track of all the different responsibilities is to have some separate accounts and keep all the finances in the right categories and accounts and so on. And so I was doing a bit of that banking the other day and just trying to clean up one of my parents' finances for their estate, as that's all being settled right now. And it made me realize, well, as a leader with lots of responsibilities, we have various accounts that we function out of as well. And so I want to just look at that for a moment. And one is, I guess, fairly mundane, but just to say that we have our personal account, our personal finances that we have to handle. And it's always interests me at times how people can perhaps be very strong leaders in certain ways, and then perhaps poor leaders in their own self-management or financial management. I remember several years ago, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court died, and here's a person that knew the laws of the land very, very well, very strong legal background, but he basically didn't have a will put together, and his estate, his heirs were all in disarray, trying to sort out his assets and what was to happen with them. he could make brilliant legal decisions from the highest court in the land, but he'd just been neglectful in his own personal finances. Just had never really addressed that. It's kind of like the mechanics who are brilliant at fixing people's cars all day long, but theirs is a jalopy that's sitting not working at the moment out in front of their house, and so I've just found that it's not that leaders necessarily always have lots of money, but I think that it does behoove wise leaders to be good stewards of what they do have. I think I've known a lot of people over the years that were very generous in giving money away, but they hated to waste it. I'd like to think that I'm somewhat generous, but I don't like waste. It's funny if someone, and I don't know, maybe I was raised, I still knew my grandparents that lived through the Depression, but it's just funny if I give a piece of pie to one of my grandkids and they take one bite of it and don't like it, and so we throw it in the garbage. Like that,
does especially that sting a little?
It does. Like I think, especially if I made that pie, which I'm not a really great pie maker, but if I made something, if I know that a lot of work went into something, and someone took maybe a big piece and then didn't like it and wants to throw it away, that I don't know what it is, but that always galls me. But on the other, but it's not. And so sometimes people can say, "Richard, you're just so cheap. Don't worry about it." But it's not about the expense; it's about the waste. If I had another grandchild that loved that piece of pie and wanted a second piece of pie, I'd happily give them two. It's not that I'm stingy about people taking pieces of pie. It's what they do with it.
Yeah.
Do I get a return on it? If they love my pie and they want to have 3 pieces, I'll probably give them 3. But
see, Richard, this is a good argument then for keeping chickens, because then that way, or pigs. But I don't think your HOA would approve of that. That's the great thing about that is it, at least in the food category, whatever, because invariably, like our girls, they'll just, they never eat all the stuff.
Alice did eat a cinnamon roll this morning, or a bite of one that I gave her.
She doesn't eat much sugar she doesn't like. So, but that way you can just, so I'm on the same page with you on waste for sure.
And so but what I find with leaders is if you're good with, again, there's lots of ways to waste your money, your own personal money, paying for things you don't need to, I've learned even just watching statements, just watching a credit card statement. Even this week, I saw something come through on my personal card that was supposed to be on the ministry card, and a couple $100, and I'm not quite sure how that happened, but it went on to my personal card that instead of the business card, and so, but I know people that never check their statements, and so they might actually be out hundreds of dollars just because they just didn't take a moment just to double check, or looking sometimes at just receipts, and you realize, wait a minute, they charged me for 2 of these, but I only got 1 or whatever. Or it can be all kinds of things. Eating out a lot. I know you and Carrie are pretty frugal and just getting the most for your dollars. And again, you can take that too far. Like I know people that just, it's almost like all they care about is how they can, get the best deal from somebody all the time. And I'm not necessarily saying that. But what I found is that people that are wise with their money have more money to invest in things that matter. So whether they give it away, whether they, something as simple as sometimes I found is just people that are wise with their money can afford perhaps to have newer clothes. Maybe they may have better business clothes, better clothes to wear to work. They look more professional, or they have a more reliable vehicle because they don't waste money on other things. But or maybe they just have more money to buy books and to be up to date in their field. I've just known folks that oftentimes, because they managed their own personal assets well, it made them better leaders. It made them better equipped. They presented themselves better. They took better care of themselves. Maybe they invested money in a membership at the local gym because they weren't necessarily getting 3 or 4 Starbucks coffees every day. And and spending all the money there on a latte instead. But and so I've just found I tell the story in the blog of a pastor I knew years ago that just was he was actually a pretty good preacher and had a real heart for people, was a likable kind of person, but he just had no self-control about his finances. And so he was always in debt. And because he was always in debt, he wore very out-of-date, ill-fitting clothes. He looked frumpy. He didn't give a good impression. And he got to a point where he was spending so much money that he couldn't afford, racking up big credit card bills, of course, paying all kinds of interest. And of course, credit card interest is just one of the ultimate wastes, spending 22% or so in interest that could have been going into all kinds of other more profitable things. But it got to the point where the people he owed money to were coming to the church trying to get paid for what the pastor owed, which was not good. And ultimately, the church had to sit down with pastor time to say, look, what's going on with your finances? The debt collectors are coming to the church wanting to get paid for your credit card bills. We pay you enough money. You should be able to pay your credit card. And he felt guilty and apologized, and the church actually gave him some extra money just to get his credit cards caught up, and told him, we just can't have this. It looks bad in the community when you're mismanaging things that way. He wept and promised to do better and was so grateful. Well, 6 months later, the credit card debt collectors are coming back because he's once again racked up debts again on things that are not critical, just careless, irresponsible spending. And at this point, the church just had to let him go. And he kind of bounced around for years from churches. A person that had some great qualities about him, but that inability to manage himself and his own finances. The Bible says if you're faithful in a little, then you can be faithful with more, with much. But if you can't be faithful just to care for yourself, then people that are looking to hire someone, they're gonna look at how you care for yourself, care for your vehicle, care for your home, care for your clothes, care for your health, the way you pay your bills promptly, and they're going to wonder, well, do I want to entrust my company, my finances, into this person's hands? And I was taking a Lyft ride home recently and was talking to a young man, and he was telling me that he's quite ambitious. He didn't plan to always be a Lyft driver. He wanted to get into management, but he didn't know how to get started. And I said, well, you are in management. And he said, no, I just drive a Lyft car. I said, yeah, but you are the manager of you. I said, what's your name? What's your first name? And I think it was Luke or something. I said, well, you are the CEO of Luke LLC. I said, you manage all of Luke's schedule. You decide how he spends his day. You're in charge of Luke's finances and where his money goes. You're in charge of Luke's car and how well it's maintained. And and I just said, you're in charge of Luke's social life and social media and accounts and the marketing of Luke and how he dresses and how he comes across. And I just listed all the different ways where I said, you're managing you as a full-time job. I said, and I said, I hire people. And I said, I know lots of people who hire people. I said, if I were just to get up close and look at how you're managing yourself as a Lyft driver right now, the way you treat customers, the way you take care of your car, the way you're reliable, the way you're respectful, the way you are informed and can hold an intelligent conversation because you're well-read and you're aware of what's going on in the world around you. I said, if I was looking to hire someone, would I be impressed with you and say, hey, are you interested in another line of work? And he said, I've never thought about that. I said, so you can tell people I'm the CEO of myself. And because ultimately that's true. And how you handle your own personal finances, if it's in disarray. And again, it doesn't mean that you make lots of money. You might not have a lot of money at your disposal right now, but based on what you have to manage, are you getting the most out of what you have? And I've known people that had really a relatively low salary, but they had a very comfortable, well-kept home, a well-kept yard. Their clothes that lasted. They were quality. They might not have a lot of variety, but what they did have was looked well, wore well. And did they take care of their body? Did they have haircuts on time or whatever? And so, as leaders, you always begin with self-management, and so your financial accounts and just all the accounting that goes on with you says an awful lot about if you won't take pride in yourself, your own appearance, your own finances, then why would you take pride and want to be a good steward of other people's? And so the second one is just business, organizational finances. And so if you're in any kind of management, you may be running a budget, you may lead a division, you might lead a department, you might have to just give an accounting for sales each day at the end of the day. But are you someone who takes pride in doing a good job of managing company finances and company assets? I've known folks that they went into the store where they were working, and they really didn't care if merchandise looked good. They didn't care if sales were up or sales were down. They were just putting in their hours. And then there's other people that treat the organization, the business, their church, whatever it is, with as much pride and care as if it was their own, as if they owned it themselves. And they care about sales. I remember years ago working at a lumber yard. It was a discount lumber yard. It was a job to get me through college. And my job was basically to be out making sales all day. People drove onto the lot, and I tried to sell them all the lumber I could, and help load it up, make them happy customers. And I remember being really excited on a Saturday when we had record sales that day. We couldn't load up lumber fast enough, and the till was overflowing with cash that day. And I genuinely was excited. And I mean, it wasn't any of my money. I got paid the same hourly rate regardless. But if I was going to work there, my job was to make sales. I took pleasure in a record day of sales because that's where I was investing my life. I wanted to do a good job there. When I was a pastor, I came to a church that had struggled with its finances. In fact, the finances had gotten quite low because a lot of people had left the church before I got there. And the income had gotten to a point where they couldn't quite pay the pastor's salary. And so the pastor had even said, hey, we're in a critical place here where we can't, there's not enough money in the bank to make payroll for me. He suggested that they sell off some of the property they had and then use that to pay his salary. And I feel bad for the man. He was a good man, but the church instead voted to lower his salary so they could afford to pay it, and they didn't. They wanted to keep the land. And so when I got there, they offered me the reduced salary of this pastor, what they could afford. They couldn't pay the mortgage and pay the pastor what he really needed to get paid. And so I was not trained in finance. I didn't have an MBA like you do, Sam, but I did understand about trying to get the most value for our church. I understood we've got a mortgage we need to pay off, and we need to be careful with our money. We can't afford to waste it, or else I don't get paid. And so just knowing that, I was very careful with what we spent. We did spend some money. We beautified the auditorium a bit. We did some repairs here and there, but ultimately we had a fundraising drive and managed to actually get enough money that we paid off the mortgage early. And all of a sudden, all the mortgage payment went away, and I was there to burn the note. And suddenly, this church, for the first time, is debt-free. And now they can afford to pay me a decent salary, and we can afford to hire other staff. And I just remember our church was never just loaded with money, but money just became not an issue anymore because we were debt-free, and the church was growing, and people were giving. But I'll never forget, a couple pastors after I was there, a pastor came along, and he just had this thing about don't talk about money. Don't tell people they need to give. And I understand there's lots of issues around that, but But I think it's teaching your people stewardship, teaching your people to be generous is a Christian thing, regardless of your view of Old Testament tithing and so on.
Yeah.
We ought to be cheerful givers, and we need to not be afraid to encourage people to do that. Well, he didn't. They didn't pass a plate, and of course, so all of a sudden they're having huge financial issues because he's not teaching his people that you need to give to the Lord's work, you need to be generous. And so they can't pay the bills. And so this guy, instead of thinking, wow, like we don't even have any debt here except to pay me, and we can't afford to pay me anymore, he began to just sell off property until, and then they'd run up a debt again. They'd have to sell off more land until they didn't have any more land to sell off. And so they ultimately had to sell the property they did have. They kind of traded with the church, and they took an inferior property, and they let their church have their land. And then when finances were tight again, the pastor finally just moved on. And I always just thought to myself, what a shame. This guy was just so careless and thoughtless about the finances of that church that he literally just about drove it right to the grave. And when I was there, we're debt free, and we're hiring other staff, and we're expanding our outreach, and we're doing more and more things. And a different leader comes in, and all of a sudden they can't even pay the one staff person that's left, and they're having to sell every asset they have, and still things are getting worse and worse. And very same church, very same dynamic, same expenses, everything's the same except one person is stewarding the finances of the organization well, and someone else is not. And you've seen that in business. A new manager comes in, and they realize, you know what, we could be cutting a lot of costs here. And we're paying way more than you need to for this service. And we're staying open these hours, and we're not getting any foot traffic in the store at this hour. And why are we doing that? We could cut here, we could cut there. We're paying for this advertising, we're not getting anything for it. And all of a sudden you realize, you know what, just giving some attention to the financial management of your organization. Is there ways, and I'll have, you've done this many times. You know, when you're running an organization, there are always ways to make money, increase sales, advertise better, get more customers, that kind of thing. But there's also ways to save money. And I get just as excited when you come and say, hey, I just realized we've been paying this and the last year, and we're not even getting anything for it. So I cut that off. We're not going to have that expense anymore. Well, that's awesome. But I tell you what, organizations over time can get careless with unnecessary expenses and commitments and paying too much for things. I used to find this when I ran a seminary and when I led a church. Insurance companies, other companies, once you've been with them for a while, they just start increasing rates, and all of a sudden you realize, well, here's a company over here that'll charge us only 2/3 of what we're paying and actually give us better benefits. Why are we still over here? And but for a lot of organizations, a lot of leaders, they just regularly just sign up over and over again. And so whatever you're leading, you might not have that big of a budget. Might be one line item. Maybe you're leading a ministry in your church and you've got 2 line items in the whole budget. But those 2 line items, are you getting the most bang for the buck? I remember at one point I'd led a ministry in our church, and it was a great ministry. I was just a volunteer. But the church went through a pretty tough time financially. We're in the middle of a building program. Things were tight, and we were finally told, well, we just don't, I know it's in the line item there, but we don't have the money in the bank right now. You can't do it. And I told my team, and members of the team said, well, we'll give over and above. We'll donate money just so that we can keep on doing this ministry. And I remember the pastor being so grateful that even in tough times, our team was saying, no, even if we have to kick it in ourselves, we think this ministry really matters, and so we need to do this more now than ever. And I'll tell you what, if you're a leader who does that, you're a leader that says, here, this is what I'm responsible for, and so I want to do the best I can with that. And I'll tell you what, there'll always be someone that wants you to work for them or to lead their organization, because you become known as the person that doesn't waste money, resources on things that have no value, but also finds a way to get the most value for every dollar that's being spent. And especially in a day like this, we can't afford to be wasteful. We've got to be creative about how to finance things. And churches certainly have to do that. There's a lot of debate about how churches will fund themselves in the future, whether they'll get tax breaks like they have been for years. How will churches generate revenue if they have to keep on doing ministry? It's going to take a certain kind of leader that can be very entrepreneurial about doing the best they can and leading their organization. And so find just a third one just to mention, that is just it's not really a financial account, but it's what I call a trust account. And that is, every leader operates out of what I call trust account. And that is, people won't follow you if they don't trust you. And so the way that you earn trust is you tell the truth. You lead with integrity. You lead by achieving a series of victories, of small wins. You develop a track record of success. And so if you have been leading for 5 years, and you have done everything you said, you have invested in your people, you've affirmed them, you've built them up, you've shown care for them. Well, then when you say, okay, I think we need to step out in faith and take on this venture, they're going to have to trust you. And every time people have to trust you, it makes a withdrawal from your trust account. When you ask them to change, that's not easy. That's costing them something. And so you're going to make a withdrawal from your trust account. And I think a lot of young leaders don't realize that. That's why someone who's faithfully led for 25 years can often ask an organization to take a huge step, maybe make a change, take a step of faith. But they've led for 25 years. They've cared for their staff. They've been there for them. They have a track record of it's always worked out. They always come through. And so people are going to say, okay, well, this is a leap, it's a stretch, but hey, we trust our leader. He's never let us down yet. But an inexperienced younger leader comes in the first 6 months and tries to make a change. And they just mistakenly assume, well, because I'm the leader, people trust me. And wise leaders always are checking their trust bank balance. Yeah. And they realize, you know what? And sometimes it's not that you haven't been trustworthy, but you've already asked people to make 3 major changes, and all of those have demanded withdrawals of trust. They've given their trust to you for 3 different things, and at a certain point, when you check your trust account, you realize, you know what, I'm about to get overextended here. My people are trusting me for all that they can right now. We need to finish some of these projects. We need to get to the other side. We need to experience some success, and then maybe give these folks 6 months or a year. Maybe we wait a year. We finish off what we've done. We build a greater track record of success, and then I'll be able to come back and I realize, okay, the trust account, we've made some deposits again. Every successful venture creates trust. Every time that you prove reliable builds trust. And so one of the questions I would just have for our listeners today is, as you lead, how well are you handling the various accounts that you as a leader have to manage? Certainly your own personal accounts, your business organizational accounts, but also your trust accounts. Do people trust you? Should they trust you based on the way you have been relating to them, the way you've been leading? Or maybe are you asking to take a bigger withdrawal right now in your trust account than you've got trust in there to cover what you're asking? Maybe you need to spend a bit more time proving that you're reliable and trustworthy. And then when you've got enough trust in that account, then maybe it'll be time to step out and to lead. But those are just 3 of those accounts that I would say successful leaders are managing those 3 particularly very, very, very carefully. They're good stewards, and because they're managing those accounts well, when they need to step out and lead, people will be ready to follow.
Well, good. Well, thank you for taking us through this, Richard, and we'll leave links to that blog in the show notes.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.